Angelina and Cole thought their honeymoon camping trip in the forest would be the perfect escape. But for Cole, this night will soon turn into the darkest nightmare of his life. What began as laughter around the fire will twist into fear, unanswered questions, and vanishing footsteps deep in the trees. As the hours pass, panic sets in and the search begins. Police arrive, uncovering scattered belongings, small clues, but chilling in their silence. They manage to find a few traces, but will they be enough to lead them to the truth? At 6:47 a.m., a trucker spotted the SUV pulled onto the gravel shoulder. Its hazard lights were off, but the engine was still running, a faint plume of exhaust curling in the cool desert air. Both front doors hung open. The trucker slowed, uneasy. Something about the scene was wrong. He killed his own engine, climbed down, and approached cautiously. "Hello," he called into the SUV. No response. The headlights were still on. A purse lay on the passenger seat. A phone charger dangled from the console. In the cup holder sat a half-finished bottle of water. The condensation long evaporated, but there was no one inside. He checked the ground around the car. No footprints he could see, just hard-packed dirt scattered with pebbles. The desert wind erased what little evidence there might have been. By the time he reached for his CB radio to call Highway Patrol, a cold certainty had settled in his chest. Whoever had been here hadn't left willingly. First response. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department arrived within the hour. Deputies strung yellow tape around the SUV as curious motorists slowed to stare. The couple's belongings were inside. Emily's handbag with her wallet, Daniel's jacket on the back seat, a pair of maps in the glove box. Their phones were missing, though, and so were they. Sheriff's deputies canvassed the immediate area. Nothing. No skid marks, no blood, no sign of struggle. Just an idling car abandoned on a barren stretch of desert highway. One deputy muttered under his breath, "If they walked out there," he pointed to the endless expanse of sand and stone. "They're gone." But another shook his head. "Who leaves both doors wide open?" The engine was switched off, keys still in the ignition. The car had half a tank of gas. It looked less like an accident and more like a moment frozen mid-scene, as though Daniel and Emily had simply stepped out and evaporated. The families. When Daniel's younger sister, Claire, received the call, she drove 4 hours straight from Phoenix, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. She refused to believe her brother had simply wandered off into the desert. "My brother knows better," she told reporters that afternoon, standing near the taped-off highway shoulder. "He's careful. He wouldn't leave the car running. Something happened here." Emily's parents flew in from Denver. They were quieter, but the anguish in their eyes told its own story. Her mother gripped her husband's arm as though afraid she might collapse without him. The families pressed the sheriff for answers, but there were none, just more questions. The search begins. By nightfall, helicopters buzzed low over the desert, their spotlights sweeping across gullies and washes. Search and rescue teams combed the scrub with flashlights. Bloodhounds sniffed for scent but wandered without direction, confused by the open terrain. The Mojave is not kind to the lost. In summer, heat bakes the ground until the horizon wavers. By night, the temperature drops sharply, the chill cutting through bone. The land is vast, and silence reigns. Volunteers in reflective vests trudged shoulder to shoulder across the sand, calling Daniel and Emily's names. Every so often, someone thought they heard an echo or a faint cry carried by the wind. But when they paused to listen, there was only emptiness. The sheriff's department organized grids, logging each section as cleared. Still nothing. No footprints, no clothing, no sign the couple had set foot beyond their car. "People don't just vanish," one deputy muttered. But the longer the search stretched with no result, the more it seemed that maybe they could. Early theories. By the second day, speculation ran wild. Some suggested car trouble, but the engine was working fine. Others whispered about foul play, hijacking, abduction, maybe cartel activity bleeding north from the border. The sheriff addressed the press. At this stage, we are treating it as a missing persons investigation. We have no evidence of a crime, but we also cannot rule anything out. Reporters pushed. Did they run off voluntarily? Could it be a staged disappearance? The sheriff shook his head. Their belongings are here. Their families insist they wouldn't leave. We're following every lead. Still, suspicion lingered. Why they left Las Vegas so late? Why take the loneliest road in the desert instead of the interstate? The first strange clue. On the third evening, a volunteer stumbled upon something peculiar about a quarter-mile from the SUV. Wedged between two rocks lay an SD memory card. The deputy who collected it turned it over in his gloved hands. No dust, no weathering. It couldn't have been there long. Back at the command center, technicians plugged it into a laptop. The card contained a handful of files, mostly photos. Blurry shots of desert brush, the highway at night, headlights approaching in the distance. And then one final image taken inside the SUV. It showed Emily in the passenger seat, turning toward the camera with a startled expression, as though interrupted mid-sentence. The timestamp, 1:42 a.m. That was just 20 minutes before the trucker found the abandoned vehicle. The detective, the lead investigator assigned to the case, was Detective Marcus Hale. Tall, lean, with prematurely gray hair at his temples. Hale carried the weariness of a man who had seen too many families break under the weight of unanswered questions. He knew the Mojave. He had lost his own cousin out here years ago, a hiking accident that had left a scar he never quite healed from. This case felt too close, too familiar. When he saw the photo of Emily on the SD card, her wide eyes frozen in a moment of fear, Hale felt something stir in his gut. This was no simple disappearance. He studied the timestamp, the angle, the lighting. Someone in the car had taken it, most likely Daniel. But why leave the car behind, away from the SUV? And if Daniel had taken the picture, where was his phone? Cliffhanger. The following morning, another deputy returned from searching the desert with a grim look. He carried something wrapped in a cloth bag. Inside was a torn scrap of fabric, light blue, streaked with what looked like dried blood. Claire recognized it immediately. That's Daniel's shirt. But the location was even more troubling. The fabric had been found stuffed inside a crevice in the rocks, as though hidden deliberately. Detective Hale stared at it in silence, his mind racing. If Daniel had been injured, why conceal the evidence? And if someone else had hidden it, who were they, and what were they trying to cover up? The desert gave no answers, only more questions. And as the sun sank behind the mesas, painting the sky blood red, one question echoed above all. Where had Daniel and Emily gone? The Mojave sun was merciless. By the fourth day, the search crews moved like shadows themselves, hunched under wide-brimmed hats and soaked bandanas. Heat waves shimmered above the cracked earth, and the air smelled faintly of dust and sagebrush. Helicopters thundered overhead, but even their sweeping arcs seemed pitifully small against the sheer scale of the desert. The command center was a cluster of tents erected near the abandoned SUV, humming with generators and radios. Folding tables were littered with maps marked in red grease pencil, grids scrawled across them like scars. Volunteers came and went in shifts, boots caked with sand. Deputies manned water stations, refilling jugs and handing out electrolyte packets. And still, nothing. The growing strain. Claire Ross refused to leave the site. She slept in her car, refusing every suggestion to rest at a motel. When a deputy suggested she should let the professionals handle it, her anger snapped. "You think this is professional?" she demanded, jabbing a finger toward the desert. 4 days, and you haven't found a single footprint. Sheriff McClellan tried to calm her. "Ma'am, we're doing everything we can. The Mojave doesn't give up answers easily." But Claire wasn't listening. She felt, with a certainty she couldn't explain, that her brother was still out there. She wasn't going home until she knew. Emily's parents were quieter, but no less desperate. Emily's mother sat beneath the shade of a tent, clutching her daughter's scarf. Her father stalked the perimeter, demanding updates from deputies, his voice clipped and sharp. The family's frustration bled into the media coverage. News vans lined the highway's shoulder, cameras capturing every flare of emotion. Each evening, anchors spoke of the vanishing couple, fueling speculation that swirled like the desert dust. A misdirection. On the fifth morning, a search team found something that jolted everyone. A set of tire tracks branching off from the highway a mile south of where the SUV was discovered. The tracks were fresh, preserved in hardened sand. They curved away from the road toward a dry wash, leading deeper into the desert. Reporters pounced. Were Daniel and Emily forced into another vehicle? Did kidnappers drive them away? Sheriff McClellan held a press briefing. We are investigating these tracks as a possible lead. However, we cannot yet link them to the disappearance. Detective Marcus Hale crouched by the tracks later that afternoon, studying them in silence. The pattern didn't match the SUV's tires. These belonged to a pickup truck, older, based on the worn tread. Hale traced the tracks as far as he could before they dissolved into stony ground. But his instincts whispered caution. The wash was a known route for off-roaders. The tracks could have been there a day before, or a week. Still, the theory of abduction caught fire. Reporters spoke of cartels, smugglers, human traffickers. The families latched onto it too, preferring the thought of kidnapping over the darker alternative, that the desert itself had claimed their loved ones. But Hale wasn't convinced. Something about the SD card gnawed at him. If Daniel and Emily had been forced into another vehicle, why would a memory card showing their last moments be conveniently dropped nearby? It felt staged. The desert's dangers. Meanwhile, the search dragged on. The Mojave punished every step. Rattlesnakes coiled under rocks. The sun burned unprotected skin in minutes. Volunteers collapsed from dehydration, forcing medics to intervene. At night, the temperature plummeted and the desert grew eerily quiet. The only sounds were the crunch of boots and the low murmur of radios. Some swore they heard things. A woman's voice carried on the wind, the faint slam of a car door in the distance. But each time they checked, there was nothing. The searchers weren't just fighting nature. They were fighting doubt. Every hour without answers made the couple's survival seem less likely. Hale's hunch. Back at the command tent, Hale reviewed the files again. He replayed the SD card images, focusing on the last photo of Emily. Her startled expression troubled him. Her mouth was slightly open, her eyes wide. Not panic exactly, but recognition. Who or what had she seen? Hale zoomed in on the reflection in the passenger side window. The image fractured into pixels, but there was something, a blur of light, a shape. Not Daniel, not Emily. A third presence? His pulse quickened. He needed the state lab to analyze it properly. But it was enough to convince him this wasn't a simple disappearance. Someone else had been there. Family conflict with the sheriff. That evening, Claire stormed into the command tent, slamming her palms against the table. "You're wasting time chasing random tire tracks," she snapped at McClellan. "You should be looking at that memory card. Somebody planted it." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "Miss Ross, we are pursuing every lead. That includes possible abduction." "Abduction by who? You don't even know if those tracks are related." "My brother isn't lost out there. He was taken. Why can't you see that?" Hale stepped in before the argument boiled over. "She's right about one thing. The car matters. Whoever left it wanted it to be found." McClellan shot him a look. "And what's your theory, detective?" "That our suspect conveniently dropped evidence to taunt us." "Maybe not taunt," Hale said. "Maybe mislead." Silence followed. For the first time, Claire felt someone might actually be listening. The unexpected witness. On the sixth night, as search crews prepared to wind down operations, a man approached the perimeter checkpoint. His clothes were dusty, his boots cracked. He introduced himself as a prospector who camped in the desert regularly. "I think I saw them," he said. Deputies rushed him inside. Hale questioned him carefully. The man claimed that around 2 a.m. on the night of the disappearance, he had been camping near the highway when he heard a vehicle slow down. Curious, he stepped out of his tent and saw headlights. A dark SUV stopped briefly on the shoulder. And then, Hale pressed. Another car pulled up behind it. A pickup, maybe. Two men got out. They walked toward the SUV. Couldn't see much more. The moon was behind them. But I heard shouting. A woman's voice. Did you see what happened next? The prospector hesitated. No, I got spooked. Went back inside. By the time I looked again, both vehicles were gone. The statement sent ripples through the camp. It corroborated the theory of a second vehicle. But Hale wasn't satisfied. Why didn't you come forward sooner? He asked. The prospector shifted uncomfortably. Didn't want trouble. Thought maybe I imagined it. But then I saw the news. Hale studied him closely. His story matched the tire tracks, but something in his demeanor felt off. Was he telling the truth or inserting himself into the investigation for attention? The second discovery. The next morning, a search dog picked up a faint scent trail leading west from the SUV. It wound across rocky ground before stopping abruptly at a cluster of boulders. There, wedged in a narrow crack, deputies found an object wrapped in cloth. When they unwrapped it, silence fell. Inside was a small notebook. The notebook sat in a sealed evidence bag on the folding table, its pages creased and smudged with desert dust. Every time Detective Marcus Hale looked at it, he felt an unease that words couldn't pin down. We're not alone out here. If something happens, check the truck. The handwriting was Daniel's. That much was confirmed by the family. But the phrasing, it was too neat, too ominous, almost like a message staged for discovery. Hale had seen cases before where desperate victims scribbled notes, but they rarely sounded like this. They were chaotic, half-finished, frantic, not tidy warnings written on the final page of a notebook. Still, the sheriff had latched onto it. The official theory. Sheriff McClellan stood before the press the next morning, his badge gleaming under the harsh desert sun. We believe Daniel and Emily encountered another vehicle, a pickup truck, on the highway the night they vanished. Evidence suggests at least two individuals were involved. We are treating this as a probable abduction. Reporters fired questions, their voices overlapping. Do you have suspects? Was the couple targeted? Is this related to cartel activity? McClellan raised a hand. We are pursuing all leads. But let me be clear, this was not a random disappearance. Someone else was involved. Claire Ross, standing just outside the cluster of cameras, clenched her fists. At last, officials were admitting what she had insisted from the beginning, that Daniel hadn't simply walked into the desert and vanished. But Detective Hale remained silent at the edge of the crowd. He didn't trust how quickly the sheriff had turned the notebook into a smoking gun. Too convenient. Too cinematic. The search for the truck. Over the following days, resources shifted. Roadblocks went up along highways leading out of the Mojave. Deputies checked rest stops, motels, and gas stations, showing blurry printouts of the SUV photo from the SD card and asking, "Did you see this couple? Did you see a pickup?" Tips flooded in. A white pickup near Barstow. A blue one in Needles. A rusty one outside Laughlin. Each lead spawned man-hours of checking, questioning, chasing. Each fizzled into nothing. Meanwhile, the desert search shrank. Helicopters were grounded, volunteers dismissed. The case was no longer a wilderness rescue. It was a manhunt. But Hale couldn't shake his doubts. The unreliable witness. One evening, he sought out the prospector who claimed to have seen two men approach the SUV. They sat across from each other at a diner in Baker, the only open place for miles. "Tell me again," Hale said, stirring his coffee. "You saw two men get out of pickup?" The prospector nodded, eyes darting toward the window. "Yeah, tall guys, I think. Hard to see in the dark." "You mentioned shouting. What exactly did you hear?" "A woman's voice. Scared. That's all." Hale leaned forward. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" "I told you. I didn't want trouble." Hale let the silence stretch. He studied the man's hands. No calluses from mining tools. No dirt under the nails. For a self-proclaimed prospector, he looked oddly clean. And then Hale asked the question that mattered most. "How did you know it was an SUV? You said the headlights blinded you." The man froze. Maybe I saw it on the news first," he muttered. Hale's gut twisted. The man wasn't just unreliable. He was contaminated by coverage. Maybe even lying outright. The wasted trail. But the sheriff refused to back down. The notebook, the tire tracks, the witness, all pointed to a pickup. For a week, the investigation revolved around this phantom truck. Deputies interviewed ranch hands, mechanics, truck stop clerks. Nothing connected back to Daniel or Emily. The families grew restless again. Emily's father snapped at a press conference, slamming his hand on the podium. "You're chasing shadows while my daughter is still missing." Claire confronted Hale privately. "You don't believe this truck theory, do you?" Hale hesitated. "I think we're looking in the wrong direction." "Then why don't you say something?" "Because without evidence, it's just my gut. And right now, the sheriff runs this show." Claire's voice trembled. "Then find me something better. Overlook details." That night, Hale returned to the SUV. It had been impounded in a sheriff's garage, the desert dust still clinging to its fenders. He sat inside, breathing in the stale scent of fabric seats and faint perfume. He studied the dashboard. Something about it nagged at him. The air vents were angled oddly, as if someone had twisted them deliberately. He shone a flashlight into one and saw a glint. Using tweezers, he carefully pulled out a crumpled scrap of paper wedged deep inside. It was a receipt from a gas station in Las Vegas, time-stamped 11:06 p.m. the night of the disappearance. That wasn't unusual, but scribbled on the back, in rushed handwriting, were 3 numbers: 34.921 minus 116.693. Coordinates. The overlooked site. Hale typed them into his GPS. The location was less than 30 miles from where the SUV was found, a patch of desert near an abandoned mining facility. Why hadn't this been logged already? The SUV had been combed by evidence techs, but in their focus on fingerprints and DNA swabs, they had missed a slip of paper shoved into a vent. Hale showed the coordinates to McClellan. The sheriff frowned. Could be unrelated. People jot down random numbers all the time. Or it's the only real lead we've got, Hale countered. After a long pause, McClellan relented. "Fine, we'll check it. But if it's another dead end, it's on you." The mining site. The next morning, Hale drove with a small team into the desert. The coordinates led them down a rutted dirt road, past sagging barbed wire and faded no trespassing signs. The mine had been abandoned for decades. Rusted equipment lay scattered across the sand. The skeletal frame of a processing plant loomed against the horizon, its metal siding rattling in the wind. The air smelled faintly of oil and decay. As they approached, a deputy called out, "Detective, over here." Behind a collapsed shack, half buried in sand, lay a canvas duffel bag. Inside were clothes. A man's jeans, a woman's sweater, both dusty but intact. Claire, who had insisted on joining the search, dropped to her knees when she saw the sweater. "That's Emily's. I've seen her wear it." Hale's chest tightened. It was the first physical confirmation that the couple had been here. But why leave their clothes behind? The deeper clue. The deputies spread out, combing the site. Hale wandered into the shadow of the processing plant, its walls streaked with rust. Pigeons scattered as he stepped inside, their wings echoing in the cavernous space. In a corner, half hidden under debris, he spotted something metallic. It was a small handheld camcorder, scuffed and scratched. The battery was dead, but the memory card was still inside. Hale pocketed it carefully. Later, back at the command tent, technicians powered it on. The footage was grainy, time-stamped the night of the disappearance. The camera shook as if held by nervous hands. It showed Daniel and Emily standing outside the SUV, headlights illuminating the desert. Daniel's voice, "We need to go. Now." Then Emily's, "Wait, do you hear that?" The camera swung wildly toward darkness. A faint rumble echoed, like an engine approaching. The footage ended abruptly. The labyrinth of the self does not simply expand outward. It folds inward in layers so intricate that each descent feels like a paradoxical ascent. To enter deeper is to rise higher in awareness. To lose one's way is to discover the hidden path. To shatter is to be reassembled into a form both familiar and unrecognizable. In this fourth segment, the narrative of becoming stretches further, weaving together strands of memory, transformation, shadow, and illumination. The seeker now understands that the labyrinth is not built of stone, nor of walls, but of meanings, questions, and echoes. It is not designed to entrap, but to test endurance, resilience, and the willingness to confront the very fabric of one's being. Each corridor of the labyrinth corresponds to a chamber of the mind, each chamber to a story, and each story to a truth long buried beneath the noise of ordinary existence. At first, the corridors narrow. The air becomes heavy with the dust of forgotten centuries. The seeker feels the burden of voices, ancestral, cultural, personal, that have shaped the internal dialogue. These voices whisper accusations, reminders of mistakes, scars of betrayals, echoes of shame. To walk deeper is to hear them louder. Yet resisting the voices only strengthens them. Surrendering to them transforms them into guides. Thus, the labyrinth teaches the paradox of acceptance. What one resists persists, what one embraces dissolves. As the seeker advances, the labyrinth changes form. The walls shimmer as though they are made of liquid mirrors. Each reflection reveals not the body, but fragments of the psyche. Some reflections smile with compassion, others sneer with cruelty, some remain blank with emptiness. These mirrors reveal archetypes: the inner warrior, the wounded child, the dreamer, the destroyer, the creator, the hermit, the lover, the trickster. To recognize them is to reclaim their power. To deny them is to remain fractured. The seeker pauses at one mirror longer than the others. It shows a child sitting alone in a room, clutching a broken toy. The eyes of a child are wide with longing and loneliness. The seeker feels a painful recognition. This child is the origin of many fears, insecurities, and defenses. To reach out and comfort the child within the mirror is to soften the edges of a lifelong wound. As the seeker does so, the mirror dissolves into light and the path ahead brightens. Yet not all mirrors are kind. Another reflects a monstrous figure, distorted with rage, envy, and hunger for domination. The seeker recoils at first, then realizes this too is part of the self. To fight, it is to give it permanence. To integrate, it is to redirect its fire toward purpose. With trembling courage, the seeker whispers, "I see you. I acknowledge you. You are not my enemy, but my shadow." The monstrous reflection nods silently, fading into smoke, leaving behind a key. The key is not material. It is insight, the realization that shadow, once owned, becomes strength. Further still, the labyrinth opens into a vast chamber without ceiling. The sky above glows with constellations unknown to human astronomy. Each star pulses with a rhythm that corresponds to the heartbeat of the seeker. Here lies the mystery of connection. The self is not isolated, but woven into a cosmic tapestry. To gaze upon these stars is to glimpse the greater order in which chaos is only apparent, not absolute. The seeker feels awe, yet also fear, for to see one's smallness against infinity can be paralyzing. But the labyrinth whispers again, infinity does not diminish you. It extends you. The seeker breathes, and in that breath, the stars pulse brighter, as if responding. In this chamber, fragments of memory float like lanterns. Some are tender, moments of laughter, of love, of friendship. Others are sharp, failures, regrets, betrayals. The labyrinth allows no choice but to witness all of them, for wholeness demands the union of light and dark. The seeker gathers these lanterns, arranging them not by preference, but by honesty. And when all memories are acknowledged, they weave themselves into a constellation unique to the seeker, a map of the soul. Yet the journey does not end here. The labyrinth deepens still. The seeker descends a spiral staircase of bone and flame, leading to the chamber of silence. Here, there are no mirrors, no voices, no stars. Only emptiness. The silence is unbearable at first. It feels like annihilation, the absence of self. But as the seeker lingers, silence transforms into spaciousness. What seemed void is actually the fertile ground of being. In silence, the seeker encounters the core essence, beyond roles, beyond stories, beyond names. The labyrinth thus teaches, identity is both real and illusion. Real in its necessity for navigating the world. Illusion in its impermanence and limitation. The seeker understands that to cling too tightly to identity is to remain trapped in narrow passages. To loosen identity is to flow freely through the labyrinth, unafraid of change. Emerging from silence, the seeker returns not as a wanderer, but as a witness, one who has seen depths unspoken. The labyrinth is no longer enemy nor puzzle, but companion. It shifts again, revealing that it has always been alive, breathing with the seeker's breath, dreaming with the seeker's dreams. The journey continues, but something fundamental has shifted. The seeker has learned to hold paradox, fear and courage, shadow and light, silence and sound, self and infinity. The labyrinth has revealed itself not as prison, but as mirror of the cosmos within. And though countless corridors remain unexplored, the seeker now walks with less fear and more reverence, knowing that each step deeper is also a step home. The seeker believed the labyrinth to be endless corridors and chambers, but now discovers a secret passage leading downward into a place that feels older than the structure itself. A faint sound echoes in the distance, not footsteps, not voices, but the steady flow of water. The seeker follows the sound, guided not by sight, but by resonance, until the path opens into a subterranean cavern illuminated by bioluminescent light. Here lies the river beneath the labyrinth. The river is unlike any earthly stream. Its waters shimmer with colors that shift depending on the emotions of the observer. When a seeker feels fear, the river darkens into crimson. When curiosity stirs, it turns emerald. When awe arises, it glows with silver and gold. The river is alive, responsive, conscious. It is the bloodstream of the labyrinth, carrying memories, desires, and forgotten truths. To approach the river requires courage, for the water does not simply reflect, it reveals. When a seeker leans over the surface, visions arise, lives unlived, choices unmade, paths abandoned. The river whispers, "You are not only what you have done, you are also what you could have been." This revelation shakes the seeker, for it expands identity beyond the narrow story of actual events. The seeker sees a version of self who chose differently, who spoke when silence was kept, who loved when fear prevailed, who walked away when attachment enslaved. Each vision is both gift and wound, for it is painful to know what was missed, yet liberating to realize that the essence of those choices still flows within, waiting for recognition. The river teaches that nothing is truly lost. Potential remains woven into the fabric of being. The seeker hesitates, but then kneels and touches the water. Instantly, a current pulls inward, not the body, but the consciousness. The seeker is immersed, not drowning, but dissolving into the flow of memory and possibility. The river carries the seeker through landscapes both real and symbolic. First, a battlefield. Smoke, cries, broken weapons scattered across mud. This is the realm of conflict, the wars fought within the self, the wars inherited from ancestors, the wars projected into the world. The seeker sees the cost of aggression and the futility of endless conquest. Yet amid the chaos, a single flower grows from the soil, fragile yet unyielding. The seeker understands, resilience emerges not from dominance, but from the refusal to let destruction define the end. Next, the river carries the seeker into a garden at dusk. Here, shadows lengthen, and voices of past relationships whisper in the wind. Some voices are tender, others bitter, some longing. The seeker sees the imprints left upon the heart, those who loved, those who wounded, those who departed. Each presence has carved a pattern in the soil of the soul. The seeker realizes that love, even when fractured, leaves seeds that continue to grow unseen. Then, the current shifts again, pulling the seeker into a chamber of crystalline walls. Within each crystal, a different version of self is imprisoned: angry, joyous, despairing, ambitious, hopeless, radiant. These selves cry out, demanding recognition. The seeker moves closer, touching one crystal, and instantly feels the rage of a repressed self surge through the veins. Another crystal radiates joy so profound it brings tears. Another contains grief so heavy it bends the spine. The seeker understands. Wholeness is not the elimination of these selves, but their integration into a greater harmony. The river then carries the seeker into darkness, so complete it feels infinite. There are no images, no forms, only sensation, a vibration deep and primordial. Here lies the origin, the memory before memory, the place from which all arises. The seeker trembles, for this darkness is not empty. It is fertile, creative, inexhaustible. It whispers, "You are older than you imagine, deeper than you believe. You're not only this life, not only this story." Emerging from the darkness, the seeker rises again to the riverbank. The journey through the current leaves the body trembling, yet the spirit expanded. To touch the river is to drink from the well of infinite identity, to remember that the self is not singular but plural, not linear but woven. The seeker now notices others by the river, figures cloaked in shadow. They are not enemies, nor companions, but echoes of travelers who walked before. Each figure holds a vessel, filling it with water from the river. Some vessels are cracked, leaking the precious flow. Others are whole, glowing with contained light. The seeker realizes every being carries a vessel, the psyche, the body, the capacity to hold experience. To repair one's vessel is the task of a lifetime, for only then can the river be carried into the world without spilling into chaos. The labyrinth whispers again, "Drink." The seeker cups hands and drinks from the river. The taste is indescribable, both sweet and bitter, fire and coolness, memory and possibility. With each swallow, fragments of forgotten strength awaken. The seeker feels the weight of despair dissolve, replaced by a quiet certainty. The labyrinth is not a punishment, but a teacher. Yet the river gives more than comfort. It demands responsibility. For to drink is to remember that the seeker is both heir and ancestor, carrying the weight of those who came before and the seeds of those who will follow. To walk the labyrinth is not merely personal. It is collective, cosmic. Every step changes not only the seeker, but the fabric of existence itself. Rising from the riverbank, the seeker feels renewed yet humbled. The journey continues, corridors stretching ahead once more. But now, the river flows within, carried as memory, as strength, as burden, as gift. The seeker walks onward, aware that the labyrinth is far from complete. Yet the taste of the river remains on the lips, a reminder that beneath every struggle flows a current of infinite possibility. And so the labyrinth deepens. The seeker leaves the river behind, but the sound of its flow remains inside the chest, pulsing like a second heartbeat. The labyrinth seems to know what has been learned. Its walls change in subtle ways, shifting from stone to something that feels alive, as if the very corridors breathe. The seeker realizes the labyrinth listens. Soon, the path narrows, winding into a spiral staircase that descends into an unseen depth. The air grows dense, filled with vibration, like the low hum before thunder. Each step reverberates, amplified 1,000-fold, until it feels as though the seeker walks not on stone, but on strings of sound. At the bottom lies a vast chamber where every whisper, every movement, echoes infinitely. This is the Chamber of Echoes. The walls are smooth, polished like obsidian, reflecting distorted images of the seeker. But the reflections do not merely mirror. They move independently, speaking words the seeker has uttered in the past. The chamber is alive with sound. Murmurs, cries, laughter, whispers Fragments of the seeker's entire life resound at once, layered over one another until it becomes a storm of voices. Each voice is familiar yet strange. Childhood words forgotten, promises broken, confessions whispered in secrecy, lies spoken in fear, declarations made in courage. The seeker covers the ears, but it does not help. The echoes are internal, resonating not only through the space but within the bones and veins. The labyrinth has become an amplifier of memory, and nothing spoken has ever been lost. The burden of words. The seeker realizes with dread, every word spoken carries weight. Words once thought to vanish into silence still live, still vibrate, still shape reality. Kindnesses linger as subtle warmth. Cruelties return as sharp blades. Silence itself echoes too. The unspoken words, the withheld truths, the swallowed cries. One echo grows louder than the rest. Is a plea once ignored, a cry for help the seeker turned away from. The sound pierces deeper than any accusation, for it reveals not only what was done but what was neglected. The seeker falls to the floor, trembling, forced to confront the gravity of omission. But another echo rises. Words of compassion once spoken in a forgotten moment, now amplified, shining like a star in the cacophony. This revelation softens the despair. Every word, whether heavy or luminous, continues to move through existence like ripples in an endless sea. The chamber whispers, "Do you hear? You are made not only of deeds, but of echoes." Every utterance shapes the labyrinth. The reflections speak. The seeker approaches one of the obsidian walls. The reflection within steps forward, separating itself like a shadow, gaining independence. It opens its mouth, and the seeker hears words once spoken in anger. The reflection repeats them mercilessly, again and again, until the seeker feels crushed under the weight of past wrath. Another reflection emerges, speaking words of doubt. "I am not enough. I cannot succeed. I will fail." The echo multiplies, filling the chamber, until it feels as though every wall chants the same despair. Yet a third reflection rises, whispering words of encouragement once spoken to another. "You are stronger than you believe." This echo pushes against the others, creating tension, a battle of resonance. The seeker realizes the reflections are not enemies. They are fragments of self, voices that continue to live in a labyrinth of the psyche. To silence them is impossible. To deny them is futile. The task is not destruction, but harmony. The lesson of resonance. The seeker begins to hum, a low, steady tone. The sound vibrates in the chest and extends into the chamber. Slowly, the reflections pause, the echoes soften. The seeker raises the voice, weaving tone into the chaos, and gradually the cacophony aligns into harmony. The chamber responds. The walls shimmer, the echoes shift, and instead of fragmentation, a single resonance emerges, deep, balanced, whole. The seeker learns, words are not merely tools, but frequencies. When aligned, they heal. When discordant, they wound. The labyrinth whispers, "You are the instrument. Tune yourself, and the world tunes with you." The weight of silence. Just as the seeker begins to feel balance, another layer of sound emerges. Not words, but silence, so heavy it roars louder than any voice. This is the silence of all that was never said. Confessions buried, apologies withheld, truths feared. The weight of silence is almost unbearable, pressing down like stone. The seeker falls to knees again, realizing the labyrinth demands not only acknowledgement of words spoken, but also of those withheld. To remain silent is also to echo. It shapes just as powerfully as speech. The seeker whispers at last, "I am sorry." The chamber trembles. The silence softens. One withheld truth has been released, and with it, the oppressive weight lightens. The seeker understands. Liberation lies not in perfection of speech, but in honesty, speaking when the heart demands, remaining silent only when silence is true, not when it is fear. the choir of echoes. Now the chamber transforms. The once chaotic storm of voices begins to align. The seeker hears not only personal echoes, but the voices of countless others. Ancestors, strangers, companions never met. The chamber becomes a choir, a chorus of all beings who have ever spoken, whose words continue to vibrate through existence. It is overwhelming yet beautiful, for in this chorus lies the reminder that no one is alone. Every being contributes to the symphony of reality, and every sound, every silence, is part of the greater song. The seeker stands, no longer afraid. The chamber has taught the responsibility of speech and silence, of resonance and discord. Words are seeds, silence is soil. Together, they grow the landscape of existence. Departure. As the seeker leaves the chamber of echoes, the labyrinth feels lighter. The walls are no longer oppressive, but melodic, humming softly as though singing the seeker forward. Yet the lesson remains heavy. Nothing is forgotten. Every word carries forward. Every silence holds weight. To walk the labyrinth is to walk within one's own resonance, tuning it endlessly, seeking harmony within the infinite song. And so the seeker continues. The corridors twist onward, leading not outward but deeper still. The labyrinth is not finished. For after echoes must come the confrontation with shadows yet unseen. The seeker walks on, carrying the resonance of the chamber within, aware that each step is both sound and silence, each breath both song and void. And the labyrinth deepens.